Say it again, like you did before.
Oh, you mean the name?
Just this once, with tenderness, like you treasure it in your heart.
Very well then.
I wasn't the one who muted the audio. Her real name is a mystery, and so is her almost everything. Here's how she describes what Lelouch means to her.
Stop being so suspicious. That's hardly the case. To me, he's nothing more than a...
He's nothing more than what? And to whom is she talking to? Well, you get the point. C2 is a mysterious character, unless you know what kind of role she's playing. If you know where she fits in the grand scheme of things, then she's nothing more than a... C2 began as a natural human slave girl. She wandered about until she met a nun, who took C2 under her wing. The nun asked whether C2 had a reason for living. C2 said that she just didn't want to die. That was good enough of an answer to convince the nun to give C2 an offer. The nun offered her special powers so that she could survive, in return for a tiny favor in the future. C2 concurred, since deep in her heart she wanted to be loved by someone. The Geass power she manifested was to make people love her. As is the case with Geass, C2 got too much of a good thing.
I'm so tired of all the proposals and flowers. Now some of them are starting a religion around me.
C2 succeeded in growing the power of her Geass to the level where the nun could get the favor she was owed. The nun could finally end her existence, which meant that C2 ended up taking her place. But what sort of place is she taking? From this point onwards, C2 is no longer only a human being. She has become somebody who's the originator of Geass. She has the code. The code is what enables C2 and V2, and later on Charles, to have all the magic. All the owners of the code started off as humans, and once they got the code, they developed additional side of themselves. They became immortal and eternally young, or as is the case with Charlie, eternally old. This dualistic nature is also present in C2. She's a girl, and as she described herself, a witch. Her dualistic nature is perfectly displayed at the end of the second season, where C2 got in a position where she locked a part of herself into her own mind. Marianne said that she locked her code.
And why did you come here for me?
Because so much has changed. I need to know if you're still on my side.
Huh?
C2, why did you seal off your own code just when you had what you wanted? Charles was ready to grant your greatest wish, the wish to die, but you stopped him.
Even I don't know why I did it. Actually, I'm a little shocked that I did.
Her slave girl side was controlling her body, while the witch part of her was inside her mind. Despite her backstory, it's not really clear what she is. Why is she calling herself a witch, and what does she mean by it? We need something to tie things together. In a research facility where scientists were experimenting on C2, there were papers on the table with the headline of Freud's Theory of Superego. When Lelouch trapped little Charlie into the C's world, he pulled out a book called Collectives Unbewusstes, which in English translates as Collective Unconscious, a real book by Carl Gustav Jung. So what do these founding fathers of psychology have to do with C2? Well, Freud developed and popularized the idea of the unconscious, and people have some sort of understanding of what it is. On the other hand, Jung's idea of the collective unconscious is unknown to most. He reasoned that there's a part of the unconscious mind which is the same in everyone. That's where the name collective originates. It's collective because it's the same in everyone. In the collective unconscious, There are patterns of behavior and images called archetypes that arise in reaction to individuals' internal state and external circumstance. C2 represents one of these archetypes.
You can't fight your own blood, can you? But regardless, that type of person is dangerous. I wonder which path he'll take. I understand. Just who do you think I am anyway?
In order to understand what sort of archetype she's playing, we need to take a look at the relationship C2 has with Lelouch. What's clear from the first episode is that she's the spark in him. Lelouch described his life as mere going through the motions until he met C2. Then there's the fact that C2 asks a lot of questions. I mean, third of what she says to Lelouch are questions, but they aren't random. They are focused on making Lelouch figure out his reason for doing what he does. Lastly, every once in a while, she provides profound insight. If you put all of this together, then there's only one archetype she can play. The role she plays is that of the Anima. Anima is the idea that men have a feminine part within them. Here, femininity should be understood in a mythological sense. In the Western philosophy, femininity is represented by Eros. In a broader meaning of Eros, it is the desire for connection and interaction with other human beings. The purpose of Eros is to pull one into tangles of life. Since the anima is the feminine part in men, it's what gets men entangled in life as well. Lelouch being a perfect example. He was going about his life, a dull and lifeless life, which he himself described as an impotent corpse existing behind a false guise of life. All of that changed when he was attracted to the truck by a mysterious figure.
Can you hear me? Are you okay?
It's you. Finally, I have found my...
But where?
C2 is as cryptic as ever. But the point is that she's the one who got Lelouch entangled into everything that followed. If you look at C2, then you can see that she's all about Lelouch. She tends to be by his side. If she's not by his side, then she's thinking about him, wondering which path he'll take. Or she's talking to Marianne, Lelouch's mother, telepathically about him. C2 has some freaky action at a distance with Lelouch, by which I mean that she intrinsically knows whether Lelouch is alive and whether his reason for living is threatened. C2 has magical connection only with the people that are closely tied to Lelouch, which makes sense if you accept the premise that C2 is the personification of Lelouch's feminine side, that is, C2 is Lelouch's anima. As a concept, anima is much more broader as is represented by C2. A great analogy to help one understand how C2 is related to the anima idea is, for example, the second Newton's law of motion, force equals mass times acceleration. The resulting force you calculate is dependent upon variables you put in. The outcome can be drastically different depending on the input. So in the same way, if you put the variables of Lelouch and rest of the Code Geass world into the formula of anima, you get C2. The sort of anima she represents is, as I call it, the reinvigorating anima. The protagonist is in a dire state. All hope of overcoming the challenge is gone. He gives up, he accepts defeat, and is ready to die. But then, all of a sudden, a ray of hope. A female figure comes up and inspires the protagonist to fight, and so he does. He steps up to the challenge, full of life, and defeats the enemy. That's a typical motif of the reinvigorating anima. It's a dynamic that underlies the relationship between C2 and Lelouch, and many others. It's what happened in the first episode. Lelouch was just about to be executed. He was paralyzed and without hope, but then C2 gave him Geass and inspired him to fight. This motif repeats itself all throughout the series, albeit in a less dramatic way. This was a mythological way of conceptualizing C2. You could also translate the fantasy to fit much more ordinary circumstances. You could strip away all the magic away from C2. She no longer would have the code. She wouldn't be immortal nor eternally young. Now, I believe that she would have to be in love with Lelouch for this to work. C2, as Lelouch's girlfriend, could do exactly what she did previously. She could be asking all the questions, helping him understand his motivations and emotions, aiding him in all the ways that the magical C2 did, albeit in a much more ordinary way. You could take it a step further. You could think of C2 as a voice in Lelouch's mind. Instead of C2 being in his bed asking questions, Lelouch could have a thought with the same meaning. You could also translate the initial inspiration he got to an internal process. Obviously, in such case, the show would be a lot more boring, since from our point of view, instead of Lelouch having a conversation with C2, we would see him staring at the ceiling and thinking. Well, that's what C2 is in a mythological/psychological sense. She's an animated figure of a man's mind, giving rise to all that which artists usually attribute to their muses. Mental projection is what's leading them, and not just them, to see all the magic in women. The magic that makes life full of liveliness and meaning. C2 isn't the only mystery in the Code Geass world. What's up with Charlie trying to kill God? And what is the C's world? Answers for that in the next episode.